You got the raise. You checked your mobile banking app, and there it was. The number on the screen was undeniably bigger. You felt that immediate rush in your chest, that small, triumphant high, like you had finally won. Wait, hold on. Let's fast forward 6 months. You look at your account again. The numbers have shifted, but the feeling is exactly the same as before. Not bigger, not smaller, just normal. You look at your balance and wonder where the extra cushion went. Here is the strange part. You didn't do anything reckless. You didn't jet off to a private island. Instead, the money dissolved quietly into the background of normal life. A nicer apartment, a more reliable car payment, a few more casual dinners out. Nothing felt like a mistake in the moment. Every single purchase felt justified. But somehow, the entire raise vanished. And if you feel frustrated by this, you need to understand something right now. It is not just you. This exact cycle happens to almost everyone. There is a silent law hiding inside your bank statement right now. It is an invisible rule operating in the background of your daily choices. Yet, this single rule explains, far more than luck, education, or the raw size of your paycheck, why some people build massive wealth while 99% of hardworking people stay trapped exactly where they started. It is called the 1% rule. And the real human psychology and math behind it are far stranger than you have ever been led to believe. Most people operate under a massive delusion. They assume that wealth is strictly a function of how much money you earn. More income equals more freedom. That is the foundational script we are handed from childhood. Go to school, get a high-paying degree, secure a bigger salary, and your financial worries will magically evaporate. But the moment you look closely at the actual data, that entire script falls apart completely. Nobody expects this. Highly paid orthopedic surgeons and corporate lawyers routinely go bankrupt. Lottery winners holding tickets worth tens of millions of dollars wind up completely broke within just a few years of hitting the jackpot. Meanwhile, consider the story of a man named Ronald Read. He wasn't a tech founder. He was a quiet gas station attendant and janitor from rural Vermont. He wore a faded denim jacket, drove a second-hand car, and spent his days sweeping floors. Yet when he passed away, he quietly left behind an $8 million fortune. He didn't win the lottery. He simply took small amounts of money, put them into things that grew, and never touched them for decades. Think about that for a second. Same country, same economy, wildly different outcomes. The high-earning professional ends up with zero, while the man sweeping floors leaves behind millions. Why does this happen? The answer isn't a secret offshore account or a complex financial loophole that only the ultra-wealthy can access. It comes down to a single percentage point. A tiny, compounding rate of daily behavior so small that most people don't even register it as a conscious decision. Stay with me, because by the time we reach the end of this breakdown, you will see exactly where that hidden 1% is buried in your own life, and precisely what happens the moment you decide to take it back. Here is what is crazy about the janitor's story. Ronald Read wasn't living like a miser because he was terrified of the world. He simply never increased his spending to match his secret wealth. His neighbors had absolutely no idea. If you saw him on the street, you would have assumed he was struggling. That is the exact part of the story that unsettles people the most. Wealth, in its truest form, is silent. It is the money you don't spend. It doesn't look like anything at all, right up until the moment it changes everything. Compare that to how we are trained to perform wealth in modern culture. The brand new SUV with the massive monthly payment, the pristine vacation photos plastered across social media, the latest smartphone upgrade every 12 months. Every single one of those signals costs real capital. And every dollar it costs is a dollar that is stripped away from compounding quietly in the background. This isn't a patronizing lecture about skipping your morning coffee or avoiding the things that bring you joy. This is a cold, objective observation about where the real math of life takes place. It is almost always happening somewhere completely invisible, and almost never somewhere flashy. Part 1. The Deconstruction. Let us break this trap down using plain, undeniable numbers so you can see the machinery at work. Imagine a visual experiment involving two different people. We will call them Person A and Person B. They are the exact same age, 25 years old. They work at the exact same company, sit at similar desks, and earn the exact same starting salary of $50,000 a year. Person A follows the standard human script. They spend exactly what they earn. Every single time they receive a raise or a bonus, that new capital is immediately absorbed by an upgraded lifestyle. A slightly better car, a larger apartment closer to the city center, a few more streaming subscriptions. This is completely normal behavior. It is what your neighbors do. No single choice feels wrong. Nothing dramatic happens. But Person B does something so small it is virtually invisible. Every single year, instead of absorbing their entire raise, they take just 1% more of their total income and automatically route it into an asset that grows, a basic index fund or a retirement account. Just 1% more than the year before. They do not feel richer on a Tuesday afternoon. They do not feel poorer on a Friday night. Their daily life looks completely indistinguishable from Person A's life. You would think they'd end up in a similar place, right? The opposite happened. Fast forward 20 years down the timeline. Person A has accumulated a collection of depreciated assets, a slightly higher standard of living, and an empty savings account. They are still entirely dependent on their next paycheck to survive. Person B, sitting at the exact same desk, earning the same base career salary, has hundreds of thousands of dollars quietly compounding in a brokerage account. They have bought themselves something that money rarely buys: absolute certainty and real options. Same starting line, same income, same career track. One tiny, boring, repeated decision, scaled at just 1% per year, created two entirely different financial universes. Let us slow the frame down and look at the actual math, because the massive size of this gap is incredibly easy to state, but highly difficult for the human brain to truly internalize. At age 25, that initial 1% difference on a $50,000 salary amounts to exactly $500 a year. That breaks down to less than $10 a week. It is less than the cost of a single streaming service and a couple of energy drinks. If you took $500 out of a $50,000 income, absolutely nobody would notice it missing. You wouldn't feel a single ounce of deprivation. But that $500 isn't just sitting in a ceramic piggy bank under the bed. It is invested. And when you let it grow at a long-term historical average market return, a transformation begins to occur. By year 10, that steady stream of small contributions has quietly transformed into a meaningful five-figure sum. Not because you worked harder, but simply because time did what time naturally does. By year 20, something fascinating happens. The earlier contributions have been marinating in the market for 2 full decades. The interest generated on top of the interest starts outproducing the new money you are putting in. The machine begins to feed itself. By year 30, the original dollars you physically sacrificed from your paycheck become almost a rounding error compared to the sheer volume of wealth the compounding process generated entirely on its own. Here's something even stranger. If Person A suddenly doubled their salary tomorrow, jumping from $50,000 to $100,000, you would assume their financial problems would be permanently solved. But history and data show they would likely still end up completely broke. Not because they don't earn enough, but because an increase in income never fixes a broken spending system. Now here's what's truly fascinating. Researchers have watched this exact economic tragedy play out for decades across every income bracket imaginable. Person A never crosses the wealth threshold because nothing in their daily financial architecture was ever explicitly designed to create a gap. This is what behavioral economists refer to as the power of marginal behavior change. Building real wealth isn't about dramatic life overhauls. It is about tiny, automatically repeated shifts that compound far faster than your biology is wired to notice. Why does an adjustment as tiny as 1% feel so incredibly difficult to execute and maintain in the real world? Part 2. The behavioral engine. To find out why this is so hard, we have to look at how our minds actually process choices. Imagine you are offered a choice right now. I can give you a single $100 bill today, or I can promise to give you $150 exactly 1 year from today. Mathematically, waiting is the obvious choice. A 50% return on your money in 12 months is an investment opportunity of a lifetime. Yet, when placed in this scenario, the vast majority of human beings will take the $100 today. This isn't a random error in logic. It is a deeply hardwired psychological mechanism known as present bias. Human beings possess an intense tendency to overvalue immediate rewards right now, while completely undervaluing larger rewards that exist down the foggy horizon of the future. You aren't lazy. Your brain is simply doing exactly what it evolved to do over hundreds of thousands of years of survival training. And that is exactly why millions of well-meaning people look at their reflection in the mirror every December and quietly promise themselves, "I'll start saving aggressively next year, once things clear up." But next year never comes. Think deeply about the last time you made that promise to yourself. Next paycheck. Next promotion. You weren't lying to yourself. In that exact moment, you genuinely believed you would do it. But here is the trick. Next year is a fictional version of you that does not actually exist. It is a hypothetical character who possesses perfect discipline and limitless willpower. Your brain processes that future self almost exactly like a complete stranger. And it is incredibly easy to sign contracts and make grand promises on behalf of a stranger. It is a completely different story to make a sacrifice as yourself, right now, in the present moment. This is why the 1% rule isn't actually a financial strategy at all when you strip away the numbers. It is a psychological bypass system. It is a method designed to completely remove the decision-making power from the chaotic version of you that loses the emotional argument every month, handing that power over to an automated system instead. To understand why this system is so effective, and why almost nobody discovers it naturally, we have to dismantle the machinery of human choice through 3 separate breakthroughs in real economic research. Let us look at a classic behavioral experiment that reveals our first major hurdle. Imagine a group of participants who are handed a beautiful ceramic coffee mug. They are told the mug is theirs to keep. A few minutes later, the researchers offer to buy the mug back from them, or exchange it for an equally valuable item, like a premium pen. You would think that if the items are of equal value, people would trade easily. But the opposite happens. The people who were handed the mug suddenly demand twice as much money to give it up than people who don't own it are willing to pay to buy it. This brings us to a breakthrough concept developed by psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. Through their work on what they termed prospect theory, they proved that we do not view money in cold, rational, mathematical terms. Instead, the emotional pain of losing something feels roughly twice as intense as the pleasure of gaining that exact same thing. Researchers call this loss aversion. Now think about how this psychological trap snaps shut the moment your employer hands you a raise. The very second your income increases, your brain visualizes all the immediate lifestyle upgrades you can buy with it. Because of loss aversion, taking a portion of that new money and locking it away in a retirement fund doesn't feel like an exciting gain for your future self. It feels like an immediate loss of the lifestyle upgrade you could have enjoyed today. Your brain actively interprets not spending as a form of deprivation. Kahneman and Tversky ran these experiments across countless scenarios, and the pattern held firm every single time. We will fight like crazy to avoid a tiny loss, far more than we will strive to capture a major gain. Losing a $50 bill out of your pocket ruins your entire afternoon, but finding a $50 bill on the sidewalk gives you a brief flash of joy that fades in 10 minutes. Emotionally, they aren't even in the same universe. When applied directly to your paycheck, this explains the endless cycle of lifestyle inflation. Every single dollar of an increased salary that you do not immediately spend registers deep in your subconscious as a loss of immediate pleasure. Your brain completely ignores your old financial baseline. It instantly calibrates to the new, higher number it saw on your pay stub, and it treats anything less than total consumption of that number as a penalty to be avoided at all costs. This is exactly why raises get swallowed up by new bills so predictably, almost like clockwork. even among highly educated professionals. It is the precise human survival mechanism that prospect theory was designed to map out. But the trap goes even deeper. Let us look at a second thought experiment to see another layer of this mental game. Imagine you are planning a night out at the theater. You bought a ticket in advance for $50. When you arrive at the box office, you open your wallet and realize you have lost the ticket. Would you spend another $50 to buy a replacement? Most people in this scenario say absolutely not. Spending $100 total feels far too expensive for a single show. Now imagine a slightly different scenario. You arrive at the theater intending to buy a $50 ticket at the door. You open your wallet and realize you have lost a $50 bill somewhere on the subway ride over. You still have plenty of money left in your account to buy the ticket. Do you still buy it? In this scenario, the vast majority of people say yes, without hesitation. Wait, think about that. In both tracks, you are out exactly $100 to see the exact same play. So why does the first scenario feel completely unacceptable, while the second scenario feels perfectly fine? This is the exact phenomenon that economist Richard Thaler discovered and labeled mental accounting. Human beings have an irrational habit of sorting money into separate mental buckets based on where it came from or what it is intended for, completely ignoring the basic fact that every single dollar is entirely identical to every other dollar. When you receive an expected raise, your brain doesn't just file it away under your core survival budget. Instead, it mentally categorizes that money into a special bucket labeled extra money or found money. And our internal rules for spending extra money are vastly more relaxed than our rules for spending our hard-earned base income. Thaler's extensive research proved that this mental sorting occurs everywhere. When people receive a large tax refund check from the government, they treat it like a celebratory gift, immediately spending it on electronics. Yet, if you gave them that exact same amount distributed as an extra $40 inside their regular paychecks over the course of the year, they would have quietly used it to pay for groceries. Windfall income, bonuses, sudden raises, birthday cash, gets quarantined into a loose psychological category. Your regular base income is carefully guarded and budgeted. Your windfall income is meant to be burned. The moment your raise hits your account, it is categorized as a windfall. It stays in that permissive mental bucket for months until it slowly settles down and becomes your baseline salary. But by the time your brain finally reclassifies it as core income to be protected, the expensive new lifestyle habits you built around it have already become completely set in stone. To break this loop, we have to look past academic theories and study the real-world data of people who actually broke out of the trap permanently. In 1996, researchers Thomas Stanley and William Danko published a massive study on the actual financial habits of self-made millionaires across the United States. Their book, The Millionaire Next Door, completely shattered the public's perception of what wealth looks like. When they began their research, they fully expected to find that millionaires lived in exclusive zip codes, drove elite imports, and wore custom suits. The reality was completely the opposite. The vast majority of actual millionaires did not live flashy lifestyles at all. They lived in ordinary neighborhoods. They drove sensible vehicles that they purchased secondhand. They worked unglamorous, everyday jobs, running local dry cleaners, managing regional supply companies, or working as engineers, school teachers, and mid-level managers. The study conclusively proved that the single most accurate predictor of long-term wealth wasn't your raw career income at all. It was the permanent size of the gap between what you earn and what you spend, maintained consistently over decades. The researchers discovered an intense mismatch in society. They divided people into two distinct groups: those who spent all their energy looking wealthy but had an incredibly low net worth, and those who focused entirely on building high net worth while looking completely ordinary to their neighbors. The visible signals of wealth turned out to be completely useless metrics. The quiet gap was the only thing that actually mattered. And that protected gap is the 1% rule in its purest, most raw physical form. It isn't a grand sacrifice. It is a small boundary line repeated year after year. When you lace these pieces of historical research together, the ultimate trap becomes glaringly obvious. Loss aversion makes saving money feel like a painful penalty. Mental accounting hides your raises inside a permissive spending bucket. And decades of empirical data prove that protecting a small gap, not increasing your income, is the only thing that separates the wealthy from the rest of the world. You were never missing income. You were simply missing a system that didn't rely on your flawed human willpower to survive. Part 3. The hidden leverage and system. Now let us pivot directly to the exact mechanical shift that shatters this loop forever. To win this game, you must completely stop trying to save more money out of your current, active spending budget. That is a losing battle. Instead, you need to automatically intercept exactly 1% more of every single future dollar you earn before it ever has a chance to touch your hands. This is the vital dividing line between relying on personal willpower and relying on structural design. Willpower requires you to fight your brain's evolutionary biases every single day of your life. Structural design never gives your brain the opportunity to start the fight in the first place. Let us look at what happens when that 1% is redirected away from your daily spending account and dropped into a low-cost market index fund. This is the simple financial tool popularized by Vanguard founder John Bogle. He built it specifically so normal, everyday working people could easily capture the total growth of the economy without needing to be professional stock pickers or financial experts. When you look at the historical timeline of the market, the average long-term return sits right around 7% after adjusting for inflation. At that rate, money does something spectacular. It doubles roughly every 10 years. Not because you are monitoring charts, but simply because time is doing the heavy lifting. Imagine a small snowball sitting at the absolute peak of a massive winter mountain. If you push that small handful of snow down the slope, it doesn't look like much at first. It rolls down a few feet, picking up a few loose flakes, growing slightly from the size of an apple to the size of a basketball. If you stop judging the process right there, it looks completely unimpressive. But watch what happens next. As the ball continues to roll down the long slope, its surface area expands exponentially. The bigger it gets, the more snow it grabs with every single rotation. By the time it hits the bottom of the mountain, that tiny handful of snow has transformed into a massive, unstoppable avalanche capable of moving trees. That is the visual reality of compound interest. If you take a 1% slice of your income and let it compound inside index funds over a 30-year career, it doesn't just create a small safety net. It creates a massive fortune entirely out of money you would have otherwise spent on random consumer goods you can't even remember buying. The most counterintuitive part of this strategy is the early phase. In the first 3 to 5 years, the numbers look completely boring. You look at your balance, see a few $1,000s, and think to yourself, why am I even bothering with this? This isn't changing my life. But you have to realize that compounding is not a straight, linear line. It is a sharp, aggressive, upward curve. The growth in year 1 is small because the principal amount is small. The growth in year 25 is absolutely massive because you are earning interest on top of 25 years of accumulated contributions and market growth. This is the exact reason why the vast majority of people give up on their investments far too early. They judge the ultimate success of the system by its first few steps, when it looks tiny, instead of looking down the mountain at the final stretch where the real magic happens. The absolute genius of the 1% rule doesn't live inside the math. It lives inside the psychological timing. Because the transfer happens automatically the exact same day your paycheck is issued, it completely bypasses your emotional brain. Loss aversion never triggers because you never visually see that money sitting in your checking account. Mental accounting never logs it as fun money because it never enters your spending bucket. You aren't trying to use willpower to beat your brain. You are simply building a pipe that routes the money completely around it. And this compounding reality doesn't just apply to cash flow. When you look at the work of behavioral scientists like B.J. Fogg, you find that this exact principle governs all human habit formation. His extensive research into human behavior proved that tiny, completely automated actions outpace massive, motivation-dependent changes every single time. Fogg developed a simple model to explain why people succeed or fail at changing their lives. He discovered that grand, ambitious resolutions usually crash and burn because motivation is a highly unstable resource. It spikes dramatically on New Year's Day, and then evaporates by mid-February when life gets busy or stressful. If a habit requires you to stay highly motivated, it is structurally guaranteed to fail the moment you have a bad day at work. The behaviors that actually stick for the long haul are the ones designed to be so small they require absolutely zero motivation to perform. Not, I am going to completely overhaul my lifestyle today. Not, I will cut out every single luxury from my life. Just 1%, shifted automatically behind the scenes, requiring you to make a conscious decision exactly once, the afternoon you set up the automation, and never again for the rest of your career. That is the profound difference between person A and person B. It was never a question of discipline. Person B simply built an automated system that didn't need willpower to keep running. Part 4. The mirror and closing. Right now, if you log into your accounts and look closely at your financial life, there is a specific number that looks suspiciously similar to where it sat 6 months ago. Maybe it is your savings balance. Maybe it is a recent raise that has completely dissolved into your monthly bills. That plateau isn't proof that you are bad with money. It isn't a sign that you lack character or intelligence. It is simply living proof that you are completely human. You are operating with the exact same psychological hardware as the rest of the population, driven by loss aversion, guided by mental accounting, and limited by an ancient survival brain that was never built to prioritize a distant future self over immediate survival. Think back to Ronald Read, the quiet janitor from the hills of Vermont. Nothing about his modest hourly income can explain the millions of dollars he left behind. He didn't have inside information. He simply built a small, permanent gap between his earnings and his consumption, protected it fiercely for his entire adult life, and let time do the heavy lifting. Remember, too, that the highly paid doctors and lawyers who end up financially stressed aren't foolish people. They are bright, capable individuals who are simply trapped in the classic psychological cycle. They treat every income increase like play money, view saving as a sacrifice, and treat their future retirement like someone else's problem to solve. The massive divide between those two lifestyles was never about raw intelligence. It was never about the size of the initial paycheck. It was entirely about whether a single percentage point of that income was automatically protected long enough for the engine of compounding to take over the work. The 1% rule doesn't ask you to make radical, painful changes to your daily life. It doesn't demand a level of perfect discipline that you don't possess, or ask you to make sacrifices that will make you miserable by next month. It simply asks for one single, automated adjustment, set up once, felt never, that allows the passing of time to accomplish what human willpower never could. Look ahead at the next 12 months of your life. Somewhere along that timeline, you will likely experience a raise, a bonus, a tax refund, or some form of financial windfall. The moment that money drops into your account, your brain will try to file it away as extra spending cash in a matter of seconds. It happens completely automatically, long before you even realize you've made a choice. The 1% rule is your opportunity to step in and intercept that automated loop. It is your chance to redirect just a tiny slice of that growth into an asset that builds your future before your mind can label it as disposable cash. Not the entire raise, not an aggressive lifestyle cut, just 1%, moved automatically on a recurring schedule that you never have to think about or debate ever again. 20 years from now, there will be two distinct versions of you looking back at this exact moment. One version will have allowed every single raise to be quietly swallowed up by lifestyle inflation, ending up with a collection of old receipts and no real financial options. The other version will have quietly shifted 1% more each year, felt absolutely zero difference in their daily quality of life, and built a massive wall of financial freedom simply by refusing to let that money become an emotional choice in the first place. You checked your account. The number on the screen was bigger. 20 years from now, your future won't remember how much you earned. It will remember what happened to the first 1%.